Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Welcome to Thanks for the Memories, Part 15. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Thanks for the Memories, where I talk about vintage cameras, ones that I personally own. And I'm really thrilled to share with you this next camera because it's very special to me. I looked for one for many years before I really lucked out and found one that's in basically near mint condition. And it happens to be this camera right here, which is the Topcon RE Super 35mm SLR camera circa 1963 to 1971. This was a camera made by a company called Tokyo Kogaku, and this particular model was the pinnacle of that camera company's camera lineup. So this is called the Topcon RE Super in Japan, so this is the Japan model, known as the Bestseller Topcon Super D in the United States. Now there are some slight aesthetic changes between this model and the Bestseller Topcon version. There's like a plate here, an area in here where you have some horizontal lines. It's not as minimalistic as this camera is. This to me is a little bit sleeker and nicer looking, in my opinion. But it is the same camera, however. And Bestseller, for those that might remember, was a major manufacturer of color and black and white enlargers back in the film era. It was very, very common, but they were the U.S. distributor for Topcon. Now, Tokyo Kogaku was famous for their extremely high quality lenses, made initially in Leica thread mount for their early efforts in the Japanese SLR arena. They actually created an SLR before Nikon and Canon actually did. And it was formed in 1932 by the merger of two other companies in Japan. Now, in later years, in the 60s, they entered a contest to see who could manufacture a camera for use as the official combat camera for the United States Navy and the Air Force. Now, this camera went toe-to-toe with the phenomenal Nikon F, and this camera won the battle, or won that battle anyway, and became the supplier until this camera was no longer made in 1971. Now, what did the U.S. Navy and the Air Force like about this camera? They concluded that it had a stouter construction than the Nikon F. Better ergonomics. They preferred the front shutter release. You could have your middle finger on the front shutter release and still be able to use your index finger to rotate the shutter speed dial. This 58mm f1.4 lens, they claimed, as did many, that it was sharper than any other standard lens made by any other manufacturer, including Leica and Zeiss. They considered it a beautiful camera, a bulletproof camera, and with lenses, like I said, that rivaled Leica and Zeiss for that era. It's interesting to note that they were the supplier to the Imperial Army, while the Nikon was the supplier to the Imperial Navy. They also made LTM lenses for a Leota camera, which was a Japanese version of a Leica. It was a Leica clone, and there were many Japanese companies that made, basically copies of Leica 3s. It was very common. The camera is solid, it's heavy, it has a minimalistic design, and Josh Solomon from Casual Photophile wrote an article about this camera in 2017. You can go on the internet and look up his article, and I'm just going to read a little bit from his article. So I want to give him credit for that here on the channel. So his comments were that every feature of this RE Super is mechanical, is machined to perfection. Shutter speed dial clicks into its detents with firm fluidity. The ASA dial spins and clicks into each ASA setting with ease. The interchangeable prism slides in and out smoothly so you can add a waist level finder to this if you want. It had a lot of accessories like the Nikon F did. It had different focusing screens that you can put on, different prisms and whatnot. The prism itself was clean and clear as any of its competitors. Its depth of field preview button, conveniently placed for left-hand operation, which is right here, slides up and down. Remember the old Minolta SRTs had a button like located right about here that you would push in, and you can actually see the lens stopping down here if you look close enough as I move the lever down. They said the shutter button depresses with one of the most perfectly weighted actions on any camera, and its film advance could embarrass both the famous Leica M and the Nikon F3 if they were doing a film advance contest to see who had the smoothest. This one would win. And I can tell you, this film advance lever is like butter. It really is. It's amazing. Even the backdoor release and the meter switch, which are on the bottom, we'll get into here, are flush with the bottom plate. And it's just, the features are well machined. They're thoughtfully placed. And like I said a second ago, part of it in terms of the ergonomics with the Navy was to be able to have your middle finger for the shutter and have your index finger be able to rotate the shutter speed dial as you're looking through when you're setting up your exposure. And if you go to rewind your film, as you're rewinding your film, now I don't have film in here, but the film advance, the lever as you're turning it will actually go up so it's higher than the pentaprism, so your fingers aren't hitting this as you're trying to rewind the film. Now, this camera had a well, before we get into some of the specs here, we'll just show you what's on the camera. Okay, so obviously we already know this is your shutter release button. You have your self timer. You have your depth of field preview, and this is the lever that you use to help release the lens. You push this lever down and you rotate the lens and the lens comes off. We'll then go to the bottom of the camera. You have two covers because Topcon also made a motor drive. They had motor drive capability, so one cover is for the motor drive, one cover for your battery. You have your on-off switch that slides, and it has grooves in it, so it's easy to grip and slide it up or down to turn your meter on and off. It also has a button that you push and rotate at the same time to pop open the back of the camera to get access to the film, to put the film in the camera. You have this extended foot around the tripod socket, and this little extended foot, if you put the camera on a table, it makes it steady when it has a lens on it. It doesn't tip down on you. Okay, if you look at the top, you have your film rewind. You actually have a top exposure meter. Like I said, you have a removable prism. and removable focusing screens. We will take this off. This is the button that you push as you slide this back to take off the pentaprism. This is your shutter speed dial. To change your ASA, it's labeled ASA, not ISO. To change that, you lift this outer ring up and rotate it, and in that window you can see your ASA value. And like I said, you have the smoothest film advance lever that you're ever going to find, and you have your film counter. From the back, really nothing on the back other than your eyepiece. And I will pop the back for you. Give me a second to push the button in. It's a little stiff because I changed the seals on the back of it. But here's the back. Here's the inside. And that's that. And we'll talk a little more about it here. It had a silk shutter curtain. It's spec'd at 1 second to 1/1000th of a second. Plus you had bulb mode. We already talked about the depth of field preview button, the self timer, interchangeable focusing screens. I'll slide off the top, pushing the button in. Okay, I just pushed the button, and this will come right off very easily. Okay. And you can now see the prism. Makes it really nice to be able to clean your focusing screen. I mean, that's a real disadvantage when you think about it when they got rid of that feature, because sometimes if your mirror foam breaks down, which on this camera it was, I had to replace the mirror foam and I replaced the rear seals. That's the only thing I had to do other than give it a good cleaning on the inside, and this thing is like perfect. And you have this little edge here that you can just grab that with your finger and like lift the focusing screen out really easy. Let me put the screen back on. There we go. Got the screen back on. And we'll continue to talk here a little bit. You had, like I said, it did accept the motor drive. You had your ISO range was 25 to 1600. And you have that window to be able to look at your exposure meter from the top, as well as seeing the exposure meter inside. A little hard for me as an eyeglass wearer to see the exposure meter, to be honest with you, because it was like below the focusing screen area. You know, it has the split microprism along with the Fresnel area around it. And it had that. Now that exposure meter that I talked about here is very similar to what you have on the Nikon FT2. Now the Pentax, back in the day, they had a prototype camera that had behind the lens spot metering CDS system in 1961, but it did not get released to the public in an actual product until 1963. It had an averaging metering system. This Topcon RE Super, now remember this came out in 1963, preceded the Pentax in production to come out with a behind the lens in body open aperture CDS, which stands for cadmium sulfide cell light meter, in the body. So you had through the lens metering. And the light meter is actually located directly behind your mirror assembly. And what's really, really interesting is on any other camera, when you look at your mirror, the whole area is a mirror. Because this light meter is directly behind the mirror, they actually etched and removed the mirroring part of it in distinct patterns and lines to allow 7% of the light to pass through the mirror assembly and strike the meter, and allow you to, have through the lens metering. And the lines were calculated in terms of their direction of the lines and their spacing and whatnot to balance foreground sky and foreground exposure values. It was connected obviously to your ASA, your dial, your shutter speed, and your f-stops, and the system was patented by Toshiba and Topcon. And for 1963, this was a huge leap forward, because you did have, eventually an exposure metering system on a Nikon F body, but it was via the photomic, pentaprism. The meter was up here. The needle was up here. It was not through the lens metering. Nikon didn't have through the lens metering system until they came out with the F3 in 1980. This camera had it in 1963. Another reason why, in many ways, other than not quite as many accessories, and we'll talk about it in a minute, some limitations on lens design because of the mount, but in many ways this camera was superior to a Nikon F, believe it or not. And like I said, they were very well known for their lenses. This 58mm f1.4 lens, which was a standard lens, was, as I said, considered one of the finest lenses ever made for an SLR. And I'm lucky enough to have it on the camera that I obtained. Now the problem with the lens mount, it's based on the Exacta mount, and in the Exacta mount the Exacta cameras were a German-made camera. Okay, so if you happen to have one, you know what I'm talking about. But I will, the design here limited the manufacturing of certain lenses because the throat was narrow. Now I'm gonna take this lens off. I'm gonna push this lever down and just rotate and take the lens off. And then I'm going to, give me a second, I'm going to get a Nikon F, take my body cap off of that so you can see the difference in the size of the opening. So here's your Nikon F, and here's your Topcon. Considerable difference in size. And here you can see that there is it's hard to see that the Nikon was actually taller with the pentaprism, with the photomic pentaprism, but I could tell you that the Topcon is heavier than the Nikon. So let me get the cap here back on the Nikon body, and then we'll talk about why that throat size is such a big deal. Okay, back to happiness here. So since the throat was narrow, lenses that had large rear elements could not be fabricated, and you had a limitation on how fast you could make your glass and whether you could make super wide angle lenses or not. Now, the widest lens that they were able to make for this camera was 20 millimeters. You didn't have any restriction on any telephoto lenses or port primes for portraits or obviously the standard lens. but your widest lens you could get that would fit because of this mount was 20 millimeters, and the 20 millimeter lens was exceptional. I know they also, in my memory serves me right, they also made a 25 millimeter lens. Now, other reviewers have stated that their lenses were a little bit on the warm side and the contrast is a little bit low, and part of that's due to the coating, and part of that's just due to the technology of the time. These lenses had a single coating on them. They weren't multi-coated lenses. But the sharpness and the film look is considered to be absolutely fantastic. So I, for one, can't wait to put a roll of film in this camera, and now that I have the seals all fixed and everything is perfectly clear and the viewfinder and the meter works, is to try it out. And obviously, even though you may be shooting film, you're going to get the film. You're either gonna scan the film yourself, or you're gonna get it scanned for you, and you're gonna have a digital file that you can then suck into Lightroom or whatever program you use, and you'll be able to adjust the contrast if you feel the contrast is a little low. You can obviously correct that easily with the software. So, in the end, due to lack of the lenses at the wide end and more effective marketing from Nikon and Canon, and a little bit of lack of innovation towards the end of their run here, that led to the demise of Topcon as a camera manufacturer anyway. They still existed. They took the name in 1989 of KK Topcon. They make other products, but they're out of the photographic market. But once they got out of making cameras for a while, I don't know if they still do today, but for a while they were making top core lenses for field cameras, specifically. They had them on, I'm trying to think, a Horseman model. If you've ever looked at field cameras, there's a brand called Horseman. And some of the offerings that you may find if you're looking for those cameras will have a top core lens on it. It's a very good lens. So in the end, it's an amazing camera. It has a fantastic light meter in it. Great technology. If you can find one, if you can get lucky like I did, it's great if you're a serious camera collector, but it's not a camera that you're going to buy for $100. Let's put it that way. It's going to cost you some money. I actually saw, and let's just admit it, that there, in a lot of cases, people ask unrealistic prices for gear, but some people were actually trying to get $1,000 just for the lens. Okay, never mind the body. I am going to take the lens off to try to show you the etched pattern on the mirror itself. It's going to be very, very hard to do. I'm going to have to take the light from my camera and try to shine it and tilt this a certain way so you can see some of the lines on it. And I will do that now. Give me a second, and we'll see if I can do it. I may or may not be able to show you what I was talking about with the etched lines on that mirror, because that's what makes it, one of the things that makes it so unique. So here is the mirror, and I will try to make some adjustments where you can hopefully see. Oh yeah, this is not going to be easy. I tried to do this before, and there you go. See the lines? See that pattern on the mirror? That's what makes this camera unique. No one else ever did that. Really, really incredible. their design, what they did to have a through the lens metering system. So that's it. I guess I'll give you a warning of something that happened to me in buying this. When I had multiple sources for, one I had, the camera with this lens on it, and I wanted to get some other lenses. And one thing you got to be careful of is people misdescribe things. So I wanted to get more lenses for this camera, and I was on eBay, and I found some lenses, and I bought several lenses. And then when I got them, they didn't work. So if you have an RE Super, you have to have a lens that has the letter R and E on the lens. Okay. Many people advertise lenses that work. They'll say, oh, it works with the exact amount. Okay, this is known as the camera with the exact amount. And they'll say, oh, it works with an RE Super or a DM or some other models. And then you get the lens and you find out, no, it does not work, because Topcon came out with other camera bodies a few years after this that were more commercial, more budget-friendly cameras, and they had a different mounting system on it, and basically similar to an OM1 where your shutter speed dial was basically mounted to your camera. They had a shutter speed dial and an f-stop dial mounted to the body. So those lenses don't have an aperture dial on them. The aperture dial is on the actual camera body. And I tried to buy a camera inexpensively, and I got it, and the body was in good shape, and the metering system worked. However, it's not really going to be very easily usable, mainly because which is typical of cameras from the 60s anyway, and even in the 70s. You might get away with a good one in the 80s, but the seals fail. The mirror foam especially will disintegrate to like a powder, and it'll get everywhere. And it was on the mirror, it was on the focusing screen. I was able to get in there and clean it on that particular camera body, but unfortunately some of it migrated to the top of the focusing screen, and there was some black gook of some kind on the inside of the viewfinder screen. So when you look through it, I could see the metering needle, I could kind of see the subject. Not really usable in my opinion, and unfortunately to get at those areas you have to take the top of the camera off, and it has like a glued down aluminum cap on top of the film advance lever, which you're going to ruin taking it off, and you're not going to be able to find a replacement. And I did call a camera repair place that I work with, and they said, Jeff, it's not worth it. It's going to cost you more to fix the camera than it's worth. It's just not worth doing it. So I have a display camera now, and I'm in search of or awaiting another camera body, a different style that will use those lenses, and hopefully I get better luck this next time. But yeah, just because somebody says a lens works with a RE Super, if it doesn't have an aperture ring on it, let's put it simply, it's not going to work on your RE Super. So that's my advice to you. So until next time, as I say, enjoy life. Enjoy life. Capture some of it, no matter what kind of gear that you use, and have a good time. And we'll see you again. Well, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate that you give me a thumbs up. And then if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment. And once again, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next time.